Hi, everybody. Welcome to our program. This is English Digest. I'm Tom.
Hi, I'm Stephanie.
And it's our News Digest unit for the month of June. It's also another all-English unit. And today we're going to be talking about something called euthanasia. Okay, now, when I was younger and I heard this word, of course, it made me think of young people in Asia, euthanasia. But no, that's not what it means. It means like the mercy kill. I guess somebody's in too much pain and you let them commit suicide or you help them do that or whatever. I think in, is it Greek or whatever? I can't remember. Or Latin, it just means good or well. And Thanasia means death, like Thanos, the villain in the Marvel universe. His name means death. So yeah, this means good death, basically. Yeah, if you are feeling depressed about something or if you have pain that just won't go away, lots of people consider the ultimate sacrifice killing themselves.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the controversy because this is a topic that people feel very strongly about on both sides. Some people feel that this is something that should be allowed, and others feel like this is terrible because it's life is precious. It's a gift from God. A lot of people feel that way. So we're going to talk about this controversy and how it applies here in Taiwan specifically and not just around the world. Stay tuned. We're going to read through today's article and then we'll be back soon. In late 2024, the suicide of acclaimed Taiwanese author Chong Yao at 86 sparked a societal debate. She expressed her desire to avoid the difficult aging process and sought to govern her own death rather than leave it to fate. Her statements propelled the issue of euthanasia back into the public arena, posing the question of whether Taiwan should legalize euthanasia to grant patients and the elderly the right to die with dignity. Euthanasia, the intentional ending of a life to relieve suffering, is legal for humans in countries like the Netherlands and Belgium, but remains prohibited in Taiwan. Due to the lack of consensus on euthanasia, Taiwan has only introduced limited legislation, including the 2000 Hospice and Palliative Care Act, which allows terminally ill patients to refuse treatments like CPR through advance directives. The 2019 Patient Right to Autonomy Act further strengthened these rights to prevent unnecessary treatments, reduce suffering, and support dignified deaths. Despite these advancements, Taiwan is yet to legalize the right to die. No other principle matters more to euthanasia supporters than the autonomy to determine one's destiny. In aging societies like Taiwan, supporters argue that euthanasia could ease burdens on families and healthcare systems, as it allows for meaningful farewells instead of prolonged suffering. Some medical professionals also agree and state that extending life at all costs may not align with patients' best interests. Opponents stress the sanctity of life and worry about the slippery slope effect that could lead impoverished or critically ill individuals to overwhelmingly seek euthanasia. They also raise concerns about the burden placed on medical personnel and the potential blurring of doctors' roles. Additionally, some suggest that Chong Yao's case highlights Taiwan's lack of death education, and that better palliative care and death education would benefit society more. With Taiwan's aging population and rising healthcare challenges, it falls upon everyone, from lawmakers to the general public, to engage thoughtfully with this issue.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. Let's talk about the contents of today's lesson. The title is Taiwan's Euthanasia Controversy Sparked by Author's Suicide. So the controversy has been sparked, or it has kind of kindled, I guess you could say. It started. People are talking about this now because of the suicide of a famous author. Even I know Chong Yao. She's famous for writing those kind of sappy love stories that lots of girls like to read. I actually read one myself.
Really?
When my Chinese was still kind of When I was trying to learn Chinese, so I read, a novel that lots of girls were reading at the time.
I can't believe you read chick flick or chit lit, as we call it, chick lit.
Well, it was actually pretty easy. It was pretty good for my level at the time. I'm not sure if I would read any more of her novels. As you said, it's more like a chick novel or whatever.
Chick literature,
Chick literature. Yeah. But in any case, she was famous. And she died at the age of 86, but she committed suicide. She did herself in.
Kind of sad. We're going to talk about how she felt about this and then generally how people who support euthanasia feel. And then also those who are on the opposite side of this debate. You could call it a debate. But she did suicide herself. She committed suicide. When Tom and I were growing up, we would just say commit suicide. But I've heard a lot of people now use suicide as a verb. She suicided herself.
I haven't heard of that.
Yeah, I don't agree with that, but you'll see it out there. So, but if you use commit suicide, it's generally more acceptable. But languages are changing so fast, it's scary to me.
Yep, suicide is a big issue, of course, not just in situations like this, but also because of bullying and things like that. It's a big topic that we could spend a lot of time discussing, but we're going to be talking specifically about euthanasia. And, of course, it is a controversy that has sparked some debate here in Taiwan because of this suicide of Chongyao at the age of 86 not too long ago.
Yeah, it was late 2024 when it happened. So if you're acclaimed, you're someone who has been praised a lot for something you've done. Maybe you're recognized by a lot of people. You could also say a celebrated author or honored author. Someone who has done some good work is often acclaimed. You could say her books have been acclaimed for their creativity and emotion. And romance, in her case, as Tom let us know. I didn't know she was a romantic author. That's a someone who just writes romance novels, which is kind of fun. I don't know any of the romance authors here in Taiwan, but I am familiar with some in America and in the UK. So this just happened in late 2024, so it's kind of a new issue. And it sparked this conversation again. It's a societal debate. Meaning society is talking about this. Societal is the adjective form to the noun society, your community, your group, people as a whole, or your society. So it's a societal problem, a societal issue, and here it's sparked or started a lot of debate.
Yes, in terms of euthanasia, but also people were talking about this in terms of gossip. Chongyao was in love with her husband, and then she started loving somebody else, and they got a divorce and stuff. My wife told me all about this stuff. It's quite a sordid story, kind of a complicated story. But it's kind of interesting.
So wait, she separated from her husband late in life?
No, I think it was younger. Of course, they knew each other, I think. And, anyway, I don't really know exactly what happened. It's a lot of gossip, but we are focusing specifically on euthanasia because she did herself in, and she expressed her desire to avoid the difficult aging process and sought to govern her own death rather than leave it to fate. Okay, so this is why she did it. She was afraid of the aging process. Okay, some people don't age gracefully, I guess you could say, or as they grow older, they have more and more problems. And sometimes they just, say, I don't think life is worth living anymore. It's just a big hassle to be alive. So some people have difficulty with the aging process, whereas other people live, until they're 96 or so, and they're relatively okay. So, yeah, it kind of depends on the person.
If you leave something to fate, it just means something is left often out of your hands. It's beyond your control. You don't get to decide. There's a saying, though, that we didn't decide when we came into this world, and we don't get to decide when we leave. So there's a lot of controversy or talk in this article about how it's dignified to decide your own demise, your own death. But there's a lot of dignity in aging gracefully and letting nature take its course. My best friend, her mother is now 97, And she is gracefully aging. It's difficult for her because she's very independent, and now she's having to rely on her family to take care of her. But one of the good things about that is my friend is learning new things about patience and love and grace, helping her mother because it's been difficult for her to care for her mother. So I think that we're also forgetting about the wonderful life lessons we learn in taking care of people who are aging and going through difficulties too. So there are blessings and wonderful things to learn out of taking care of people who are near death's door, you could say. And I think about those 10, 11 years that my best friend's mother has had to enjoy her family and life itself that Chong Yao doesn't have because she decided she just didn't want to deal with it. It's too hard.
That was her decision. But in any case, of course, this is a topic that has been discussed not just because of Chong Yao. I think there have been other celebrities here in Taiwan. I think there was some guy who went to Switzerland for assisted suicide. So that's probably been discussed before.
Yeah, we talked about that, actually.
Indeed. And so here she wanted to govern her own death. She wanted to, take care of it, to monitor it, rather than leave it to fate. And her statements propelled the issue of euthanasia back into the public arena. So here we've got the word propel. That just means to push something, to move it forward. Basically, this issue is now being discussed because of her suicide. Yes, people are now discussing this again. Yeah, what is euthanasia? Is it good? Is it bad? Should we change the laws? Yeah, what should we do?
Yeah, and here it's posing the question of whether Taiwan should legalize euthanasia. Right now, it's illegal to have any part of this process. So if you help someone kill themselves, you will be arrested. It's illegal. But they're talking about maybe we should change the law. To legalize something is to make it part of law so that you can do something. And legislation would be a law or set of laws that are created or passed by the government. To legalize this would mean to grant patients and the elderly the right to die with dignity. And I disagree with that sentence there. Dignity, if you die with dignity, could also mean you don't just decide to kill yourself, but that you let nature take its course. That's also quite dignified as well. It depends on how you look at things, right? So it is a controversial subject. Euthanasia is the intentional ending of your life to relieve suffering, or maybe you're having a really bad day. That's what's scary, because we're hearing about even young people in Canada currently where it's very legal to commit suicide. We've got young folks that are having bad days and just killing themselves, and the government's going, sayonara, it's okay, goodbye. And so we're going to talk about some of the scary things about actually making it legal. It is legal in some countries like the Netherlands and Belgium. It's very easy to kill yourself there. And it still remains prohibited in Taiwan, meaning you can't do it legally. I bet some people are sneaking these suicides in, though, without letting the government know.
You never know. And yes, indeed, there's a lack of consensus on euthanasia, which means not everybody agrees on this issue. Consensus just means agreement. So due to the lack of consensus on euthanasia, Taiwan has only introduced limited legislation, including the 2000 Hospice and Palliative Care Act, which allows terminally ill patients to refuse treatments like CPR through advance directives. That's quite a long sentence, so let's break it down here again because of the consensus or the lack of consensus, because people don't quite agree on this issue. Well, the government Taiwan has introduced some laws, but this is limited legislation. Legislation just means laws. And some of this legislation includes an act that came out, oh my goodness, about 25 years ago, the 2000 Hospice and Palliative Care Act. A hospice refers to a place you go to because you're expecting to die, so you can go there and die in peace or whatever. You don't have to be in a hospital or whatever. My own mother passed away in a hospice. And in this particular case, though, they have a law governing this practice. And palliative has to do with treating pain, basically, but also just kind of treating the surface symptoms and not really getting to the root of the problem.
Right. So it's something that a lot of people are talking about right now. This brought to mind something that I went through. My dad passed away a couple of years ago, and he, his body was just letting him down. So he decided that he wanted to pass away at home. We didn't put him in the hospital. He stayed with us until he passed away. And we had a doctor and a nurse come to the house. But he had something called a DNR, which is similar to what Taiwan currently has, which means do not resuscitate, which means if your body is naturally passing away or naturally shutting down, we would say, it tells the doctors don't give them any sort of treatments that will keep them alive unnaturally. So that would be putting you on machines to keep your heart beating or to help you breathe when you can't breathe naturally. So that is something that you might look into. They currently have that available here in Taiwan. It's called a directive. A directive is something that you that gives directions or guidance to some sort of, I think, government institution. So, yeah, there's a lot about that we're going to get to, but you would need to go through legislation and have that pass in your parliament in order for you guys to actually have legal euthanasia. Right now, you've got different kinds of legislation available that were passed in 2000. The hospice, as Tom said, hospice is care outside your home where you check in and your loved one is taken care of 24/7. But when it's time for them to go, naturally, they do pass away. That's available. It allows these terminally ill patients to refuse treatments like CPR, or as I said, be put on machines that keep your heart and your lungs working long term when your brain perhaps is already shut down, which doesn't make any sense. If your brain is shut down, you're gone, really. So they can refuse these treatments through advanced directives. And our advanced directives, at least in the United States, is called the DNR, do not resuscitate.
Yeah, it's like a request, an order you have before you pass away, not to allow people to perform CPR on you. CPR is cardiopulmonary resuscitation. Okay, they try to fix your heart or your lungs, even though you're going to pass away anyway. Now, the 2019 Patient Right to Autonomy Act further strengthened these rights to prevent unnecessary treatments, reduce suffering, and support dignified deaths. So this is another piece of legislation. This happened in 2019, about 6 years ago. It's the Patient Right to Autonomy Act. Autonomy means you control yourself. For example, some parts of the world are autonomous. I think there's some autonomous regions in China where they're free to govern themselves. I think Guangxi is one. I'm not quite sure. I don't remember. But in any case, personal autonomy just means you can control your own life. Doctors won't be able to interfere with the process of life and death. Okay, that brings us to the end of the first part of our lesson for today. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Let's take a little break.
Welcome back, guys. We're talking about euthanasia, a controversial subject, you could say, and it's especially controversial here in Taiwan currently because debate was sparked by an author's suicide via or through euthanasia. That's Chong Yao, a romance author who decided she didn't want to put up with natural death and wanted to end her own life because she didn't feel like it was dignified to suffer through death. She could have been hit by a truck, the next day. We never know when we're going to leave this life. Some people like to determine when that happens, and they do it through suicide. Euthanasia is when somebody helps you end your life. It's not just you committing suicide. Someone is helping you end your life in a way that will perhaps reduce suffering. Usually it's done through chemical means. Perhaps they give you a shot that stops your heart. There are different ways that euthanasia is completed or enacted. So we're talking about some legislation that Taiwan has already passed. Back in 2000, there was an act called the 2000 Hospice and Palliative Care Act, and that allowed for terminally ill patients to refuse treatments like CPR through advanced directives or advanced orders that you give to family members saying, hey, if I have a heart attack and I'm in really bad shape or my cancer has gotten to the point where my body is slowly dying, don't resuscitate me. Don't bring me back. Let me just die naturally. Don't put me on any machines is what usually happens in the hospital. So that is currently legal. So that's still dying naturally. That's not euthanasia. That's letting nature take its course. But there's also the 2019 Patient Right to Autonomy Act. What does that say, Tom? What did they want with this particular piece of legislation?
Well, it allows those patients who are terminally ill to refuse treatments like CPR. And, of course, they'll have some advanced directives. They'll, state this ahead of time so that when the doctors try to resuscitate them, they'll know that this person does not want to be resuscitated. So that's basically what that law does. And then we also have the 2019 Patient Right to Autonomy Act, and that further strengthened these rights because they wanted to prevent those unnecessary treatments. They also wanted to reduce the suffering and support those dignified deaths, to die with dignity and not die like some vegetable on the gurney in the hospital or whatever. Some people don't want to die that way. But despite these advancements, even though we have these advancements, even though we have this legislation, Taiwan has yet to legalize the right to die. Okay, so if you want to do that, you've got to go elsewhere. It's illegal still here in Taiwan.
So moving on to the next paragraph, it says, no other principle matters more to euthanasia supporters than the autonomy or the ability to self-determine your own destiny, to decide when you want to leave this life. So in aging societies like Taiwan and many around the globe, we've got a lot of aging societies. People aren't having many kids anymore, so we've got more and more elderly that we're having to deal with. These supporters argue or say that euthanasia could ease burdens on families. To ease burdens means to make life easier for these families in a lot of ways, and on healthcare systems. A burden is just some sort of heavy responsibility that someone's needing to take on. It's hard to carry. It's hard to take care of sick patients, as you know, especially if you and your husband are both working and you have an elderly parent to take care of. It's difficult. One of the things, though, in my family, we grew up knowing that no matter what, we were never going to put my parents into a hospice care or a rest home where elderly people go to die slowly. The people who care for them there don't love them like you do. And there were enough of us in my family. There were, 8 kids. If one of us couldn't do it, somebody else would step up. But that's not always the case with lots of families. Maybe there's no one to take care of that sick or very elderly grandparent or even parent. So someone needs to take care of them, and it can be a burden on families that way and also healthcare systems. So some of these people who are euthanasia supporters are going, yeah, we should just let people die, let them go. There are a lot of them we can't take care of. They're too expensive. They're a burden. Let's just let euthanasia pass.
Right, and of course, this is talking about personal autonomy. Should you decide whether you want the doctor to help you die? Is that legal? Is that moral or whatever? And of course, there's another situation involving I guess I'd call them vegetables, basically people who have lost their cognitive abilities. They can't really think, but they're being kept alive artificially. Yeah, what should we do about them? We've got all these elderly people, and there's a lot of stress on the national healthcare system. So yeah, these are questions that you can all discuss amongst yourselves. And yes, indeed, we're talking about having meaningful farewells. I'm going to go. I've decided to go. Goodbye. It's been nice to be with you. I'm not going to turn into a vegetable. This might also be a concern for people suffering from dementia or something before they're totally gone and before they become a different person. Maybe it would be meaningful for them to have a proper farewell. Now, some medical professionals also agree and state that extending life at all costs may not align with patients' best interests. Okay, so these are medical professionals, doctors, basically. They agree, and they also state that, yes, if you extend life at all costs, well, that might not match the interests of the person. Of course, doctors, I think they have the creed or the idea that you have to save a patient at all costs. You can't give up on them. So for doctors, it's like, well, you need to keep on trying. You have to keep them alive as long as possible, but that might not be what the patient actually wants.
To align with means to agree with someone's principles right here. So you want to align with your principles or your strong-held beliefs. So opponents stress the sanctity or the holiness, the value of life, and they worry about the slippery slope effect. The slippery slope is a phrase we use to talk about a situation where one small decision can lead to bigger and often more negative consequences. You have to be careful. Maybe if you steal a candy bar as a young child, that might be a slippery slope that leads to a life of crime. So be careful on that slippery slope. It's a dangerous path you're on. It's a risky path that you get on. Sometimes people are worried about the slippery slope effect that could lead impoverished or very poor or critically ill individuals to overwhelmingly seek euthanasia. Rather than have to deal with bills or have to deal with that the illness that they have, they will overwhelmingly seek to commit suicide. They also raise concerns about the burden placed on medical personnel and the potential blurring of doctors' roles. Tom mentioned that, at least I know in the United States, doctors take a vow, an oath. They promise to always never do harm. Never do any harm to the patient and always seek the patient's best interests. Personnel just means people that are involved with some sort of job or organization. The personnel, the staff there, the workers, the employees, those are the personnel. And if you blur something, you make something that is supposed to be clear and very obvious to be kind of fuzzy. It's unclear. It's difficult to see. So they're blurring their roles. Are they supposed to help people die? Or are they supposed to be helping these patients stay alive? What is their role?
Right, exactly. And of course, this question or this issue gets more complicated because of the burden of more and more elderly people here in Taiwan. Remember, recently there was the case of people lining up in emergency rooms because they did not have enough nurses. So yeah, there are lots of people who are not choosing to go into medical professions, or there just simply aren't enough young people to fill those roles. So that's another problem you can discuss. And additionally, some suggest that Chongyao's case highlights Taiwan's lack of death education and that better palliative care and death education would benefit society more. This is probably not just true in Taiwan, but all over the world. There's a lack of death education. I remember we had a death class, I think it was in 8th grade. We had to talk about it.
Oh, really?
And, what you do about it and how you deal with it and stuff like that. But most people just don't want to talk about it. You just don't talk about death. It's just not something that's very happy. You only talk about it if you have to. But yeah, this is a reality of life that we're all going to die, and everybody you know are going to die. So indeed, you probably should know how to deal with this.
It's a really important discussion to have with your family members, especially before they get too old, to let you know how they feel about things, right? My mom, when she passed away, we had no time to talk about anything because it was a heart attack and she was gone. But with my dad, we had lots of time to talk about what he wanted. He definitely didn't want to go to the hospital. He wanted to stay with us at home. It was during COVID. So if he'd gone to the hospital, we couldn't even go and see him, which was ridiculous. Now we know how dumb that was. But then, we had chance to talk about his wishes. Did he want to be given painkillers? So that because once you're given painkillers, you really can't communicate very much. And he didn't want that. He wanted to be able to talk and think clearly until the very end. And so we had time to arrange things. But this is a really important issue. You should always talk about it. And if you have children, you need to be talking about this with your spouse. Even if you're in your 20s and 30s, if you die suddenly, who's going to raise your kids? These are all really important issues that are beyond the scope of just euthanasia, but death is a reality, and we should prepare ourselves for it.
And here's the final paragraph. It says, with Taiwan's aging population and rising healthcare challenges, it falls upon everyone from lawmakers to the general public to engage thoughtfully with this issue. So yes, of course, we've got more and more old people in the population. And of course, healthcare is a challenge. Of course, it's in debt every year, and it costs a lot to provide healthcare for people. So because of these problems, everyone needs to talk about this. Lawmakers, people, they all need to engage with this issue. Something needs to be done, or it's going to be a big disaster. Okay, that brings us to the end of our discussion for today. And it's the end of our program. So thanks for joining us. And also, we'll see you on Facebook and YouTube. From all of us here at English Digest, I'm Tom.
I'm Stephanie.
Goodbye.
Bye.